Speaking of weekend winners, LSU football was a big one as they picked up the news on Friday afternoon that Jacqueline Roy, top player in this state, according to 247, top defensive tackle in the state, and one of the tops in the country, pledged his commitment to LSU. As we told you, that's now 22 commitments for Ed Ogeron and the staff going into the season. That was big news. And Barton Simmons, who's the national analyst for 247, kind enough to stop by here with us on Monday morning. Thank you for the time, man. How are you?
Absolutely. Appreciate y'all having me. I'm good.
Always. What's that mean for LSU picking up Roy?
Well, it's this constant battle with Coach O to make sure that he's doing what he's supposed to be doing in the state of Louisiana. I think he takes tremendous pride in that and just making sure that he wins the state year in, year out. And I think this was obviously a really critical piece to that component. And I think Jacqueline Roy is to me, he's got 5-star kind of upside in this class. I think he's somebody that we elevated in our most recent rankings update, but he may not be done, if he can continue to kind of dominate as a senior. But, he is in a lot of ways kind of what we look for right now at defensive tackle. He's lean. He's actually trimmed down from his sophomore year and gotten really athletic, physical, nasty, does it in pads, does it athletically. So you really like the way he looks like he's projecting and the trajectory there. So it's just a huge get for in-state reasons, but just because he's one of the best defensive tackles in all of high school football.
So, Barton, you mentioned Roy maybe having the ability to get bumped up to a 5-star, and some people argue, like, what does it matter? But a lot of people put a lot of stock in that stuff, and the ability to trumpet recruiting rankings can go a long way towards kind of helping a coach's public relations part. I guess, what do you have to see out of him this late in the process to get bumped up to that coveted 5th star?
It's less about because where he's at, and I don't have his ranking in front of me, but it's in top 50 range, and where he's at, it's kind of like all those guys in that range have some 5-star potential. So it's really, to be honest with you, as we approach it, our 5-star list is 32 players long by the end of the process. It's how we sort of we project those guys to be the most likely first-round NFL draft picks. And so when you look at where he is, it's more about proving he's better than the guys around him. And so obviously there's a lot of moving parts there, and it's going to be about what he does, puts on film. And he had a great spring in terms of spring practice and dominating in that setting in pads. So we'll see what he does as a senior. We'll see how that compares to the guys around him. We'll see what he does at the All-American Bowls. I think he's at the Under Armour game in January. So obviously that's an apples to apples sort of comparison. We see these guys side by side in pads as well. He's right there. He is. It's just about splitting those hairs and figure out which ones are truly the best in this class.
Barton, give me some insight here on LSU's brand and what they've done with it over the last recruiting cycle, because they've really stepped outside of the state. While Ogeron has put an emphasis on building a wall around the borders here in Louisiana, there's an emphasis in this class in 2020 of really reaching out and getting big-time guys, whether it's Elias Ricks, who's now playing at IMG, or a guy like Max Johnson, a quarterback out of Georgia. What has LSU's brand done from your point of view to really extend their reach in this cycle and be so relevant?
Yeah, I think that's been a storyline for sure for this LSU recruiting class, because LSU's they're always going to prioritize this in-state as they should, and that's always going to be sort of the foundation, cornerstone of their recruiting. But as opposed to supplementing that with regional prospects, and you can get plenty of good regional prospects where LSU is located, obviously. But as opposed to just sort of limiting yourself to just the guys kind of in the southeastern or SEC footprint, LSU has sort of embraced, or Coach Ogeron has embraced, that LSU has a brand that resonates beyond the SEC, and they've leaned on that. They've gotten into the DMV region with guys like Rakeem Jarrett. They've gotten into California with Elias Ricks. They've gotten Jordan Tolles, another guy from the DMV region. Like, they've gotten really good players from coast to coast, literally. And I think when you look at where recruiting is going right now, and you look at the teams LSU is competing with and wants to be competing with in terms of, like, number one class type teams.
Yeah.
Clemson, Alabama, Ohio State. I mean, Ohio State isn't recruiting Midwest guys. Alabama is no longer recruiting Southeastern guys. I mean, they're recruiting nationally. And I think if you really want to contend for number one classes, and I know how competitive Coach O is on this recruiting stuff, and he does, I think that is becoming a little bit more of a necessity to go get the best players wherever they are, because more than ever, guys are willing to get outside of their region, especially when you got powerhouse hotbeds like Los Angeles and Southern California where teams are struggling. And especially when you've got sort of, when a program like Ohio State is getting out of the Midwest, and not that LSU is prioritizing the Midwest, but that opens the door for others to come in and get some of the guys that they aren't valuing as much. So I think just that there's a trickle-down effect across college football right now where teams are getting outside of their traditional regions, and you just got to, if you're hunting with the big dogs, you got to go out and just find the best players wherever they are.
And so when you look at LSU and Alabama right now, I believe they're 2-3 in the 247 ranking. I think anybody's going to be hard-pressed to catch Clemson, LSU and Alabama neck and neck. How about the new facilities that LSU just built? Garnered a lot of headlines locally and nationally last week. You're an expert in this field, Barton. Like, how much of a return can you get on brand new facilities like that?
I mean, there's certainly how to quantify it, how to measure it. That's tricky, but I think there's no question that makes an impact. I mean, those videos, those social media videos were, you were seeing it, I was seeing it. I guarantee you that the players are seeing it, the prospects are seeing it, and that's, I think, important. We're past the days when a kid's going to just sort of pick a school because of its locker, but it's all part of it. It's just it's an ingredient in the pot. You go to a program, you take an official visit, you take an unofficial visit, and when you're sort of wide-eyed and mouth open, just sort of amazed at your facilities, it's part of that whole process of coming away impressed and excited and energetic about what's there. And so especially when we're talking about guys that are, being recruited nationally, a kid from New Orleans, it may not matter what the lockers look like, but it sure helps when you're coming in from California or the East Coast, and you're coming down there and you see what that facility is turning into. I mean, that matters. And so I think it really helps sort of supplement and push that continued national reach.
Barton Simmons, he's 247 Director of Scouting on Twitter. At Barton Simmons is where you can find him. Also a national writer for CBS Sports College Football. One more on on one specific player down here. If there is one criticism on 2020 and what they've been doing is that they're lacking offensive linemen. Cedric Van Pran is one of the top offensive linemen in the state out of New Orleans. Seems like it's an SEC battle for him. Where's LSU fit in on his recruitment?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they're right in there. I mean, that's the type of guy, again, New Orleans kid that they're always going to have a shot with. He didn't get to LSU a whole lot this summer, and so I think that this is going to be a battle. He's visited Texas A&M, he's visited Oklahoma. I think Tennessee is in there with them, Georgia's in there with them. So I mean, it really is kind of one of these SEC battles. And for a guy that plays center, and there's not a whole lot in this class right now of guys that really have center experience that are among the really elite in this class. So I think he's a priority for a number of programs. Georgia and Sam Pittman have been recruiting really well, so that's going to be a challenge on the offensive line. But LSU's they're the home team, and so I think that they're always going to be in great position there. So I think that's going to be one to monitor here during the early fall as we get into the season.
Good to hear from you, man. Thanks for checking in with us this morning.